The champagne glass slipped from Amara's hand before she even felt the sting. The sound of crystal shattering against marble echoed through the Seoul Metropolitan Hospital's grand ballroom, but it was nothing compared to the gasp that rippled through 300 guests when Mrs. Han's palm connected with Amara's face. Amara's head snapped to the side. Pain bloomed across her cheek, hot and sharp. She tasted copper. For a moment the world went silent. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Conversations died. Even the servers froze, trays balanced on their fingertips. Mrs. Han stood before her, hand still raised, diamonds glittering on every finger. Her face was twisted with rage, her designer gown shimmering under the chandelier light. "How dare you?" Mrs. Han hissed, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "How dare a foreign nurse like you stand here and lecture us about healthcare? You think you can come to our country and tell us what to do?" Amara touched her cheek. Her fingers came away red. Blood from where the woman's ring had caught the skin. If you love emotional romance stories where the wronged get justice, hit like and stay tuned. "Mrs. Han," Amara said quietly, her voice steady despite the trembling in her legs. "I was simply presenting the maternal health initiative that your husband's foundation is funding." "My husband's money!" Mrs. Han shrieked, stepping closer, forcing Amara backward until her spine hit the edge of the presentation table. "Wasted on programs designed by someone like you. A foreigner who barely speaks our language properly. My son nearly died because of incompetent nurses like you." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Amara's jaw tightened. She knew exactly what Mrs. Han was referring to. 3 months ago, Mrs. Han's adult son had been admitted to the ICU after a car accident. Amara had been part of the team that revived and saved his life, working a 16-hour shift to stabilize him when he crashed twice on the table. But Mrs. Han had complained endlessly about every aspect of his care, demanding Korean-only staff, insisting that foreign medical personnel were inferior. "Your son is alive because of the medical team that treated him," Amara said, her voice low but clear enough that nearby guests could hear. "Every single one of us, regardless of where we were born." Mrs. Han's face flushed crimson. "You dare speak back to me? Do you know who I am? My family has donated millions to this hospital. One word from me, and you'll be deported by morning." Amara felt her phone buzz in her clutch. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Han Jae-min always seemed to know when something was wrong, as if he could sense disturbances in her world from across the city. But she couldn't answer. Not yet. Not while 300 pairs of eyes watched this spectacle unfold. Mrs. Han leaned in close, her breath hot against Amara's ear. "You foreign workers come here thinking you're special, but you're nothing. You're replaceable. And I will make sure everyone knows exactly what you are. A pretender who doesn't belong in our society." The word struck deeper than the slap. Amara had heard variations of them before, whispered in hospital corridors, muttered behind hands at staff meetings, coded in polite rejections from colleagues who would never quite accept her as an equal. But never so publicly. Never so viciously. For a split second, Amara's mind flashed back to 6 months ago. She saw herself at another charity auction. This one smaller, more intimate. She'd been invited by the hospital director, and had been told it would be good for her to network, to show her face among Seoul's elite. She remembered standing near the bidding table, champagne in hand, when a man in an impeccably tailored black suit had bid an absurd amount on a small watercolor painting. 5 million won for that? Amara had said, not realizing he was standing right behind her. It's not even that good. The artist is clearly capitalizing on emotional manipulation, rather than actual skill. She turned and found herself face to face with Han Jae-min. His eyes had been dark, unreadable. The crowd around them had gone quiet, waiting for his reaction. Everyone seemed to know who he was except her. "You think so?" he'd said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "I do," Amara had replied, lifting her chin. "Charity is important, but so is artistic integrity. Overpaying for mediocre work just because it tugs at heartstrings doesn't help anyone in the long run." Someone had gasped. A woman nearby had actually grabbed her companion's arm, eyes wide with shock. But Han Jae-min had smiled. Not a warm smile. Something cooler, more calculating. Like a chess player who just spotted an unexpected move from his opponent. "Interesting perspective," he'd said. Most people here would never dare to question my judgment. Then maybe they should, Amara had said, too exhausted from her shift to care about propriety. Honest feedback is more valuable than empty flattery. He'd studied her for a long moment, and she'd felt something shift in the air between them. Something electric and dangerous. I'm Han Jae-min, he'd said finally. Amara Okeke. I know. That had been the beginning. The memory dissolved as Mrs. Han grabbed Amara's wrist, her nails digging into skin. Are you even listening to me? Mrs. Han demanded. I'm speaking to you. Amara pulled her arm back, but Mrs. Han's grip tightened. Around them, guests shifted uncomfortably. Some pulled out phones, whether to call for help or to record the scene. Amara couldn't tell. Mrs. Han, please let go of my arm, Amara said firmly. I'll let go when I'm ready. First you're going to apologize. Publicly. On your knees. Amara's face beamed in shock and curiosity at the same time. The demand sent a shock wave through the crowd. Several people whispered furiously. A few looked away, embarrassed to witness such a display. But Amara saw something else. She saw Dr. Kim, the hospital director, standing frozen near the main entrance, his face pale. She saw board members exchanging glances, calculating the political fallout. She saw the hospital's PR director frantically typing on her phone. And she saw Mrs. Han's assistant, a young woman barely out of university, recording everything on her phone with an expression of grim satisfaction. Not to help Mrs. Han, Amara realized, but to document her cruelty. Amara's phone buzzed again, twice in rapid succession, the pattern Han Jae-min used when something was urgent. I won't apologize, Amara said quietly, because I've done nothing wrong. Mrs. Han's eyes widened, as if she couldn't believe anyone would dare refuse her. Nothing wrong? You humiliated me by suggesting that my son's care was anything less than inadequate. You stood at that podium and talked about improving standards of care. As if our hospital isn't already the best in Korea. I talked about expanding maternal health access to underserved communities, Amara corrected. I never mentioned your son. You're the one who connected those dots. It was the truth. Amara's presentation had focused entirely on creating better prenatal care for foreign workers and low-income families, populations that often fell through the cracks of Korea's healthcare system. She'd been passionate about it, pouring weeks of research into the proposal. The fact that Mrs. Han had taken it as a personal attack said more about Mrs. Han's guilt than anything else. Mrs. Han raised her hand again, and Amara braced herself for another blow. It never came. I wouldn't do that if I were you, a voice said from behind Mrs. Han. Cool, controlled, and absolutely lethal. Every head in the ballroom turned. Han Jae-min stood at the entrance, flanked by 6 men in dark suits. He looked exactly as he always did. Perfectly composed, devastatingly handsome, and radiating the kind of power that made people instinctively step back. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mrs. Han's hand lowered slowly. She turned, recognition dawning on her face, followed quickly by confusion. Mr. Han, she said, her voice suddenly uncertain. I didn't realize you were attending this evening. I wasn't planning to, Jae-min said, walking forward. The crowd parted before him like water. But then I received a very concerning call. His eyes found Amara's across the room. In that single glance she saw everything. Concern, fury, and something darker that made her pulse quicken. He crossed the ballroom in purposeful strides, his men falling into position around the perimeter. Not threatening exactly, just present. A silent reminder of who controlled this space now. When he reached Amara, he stopped. His jaw was tight, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. His gaze swept over her face, taking in the blood on her cheek, the finger-shaped marks on her wrist where Mrs. Han had grabbed her. Amara, he said softly, his voice meant only for her. Are you hurt? I'm fine, she said, though her voice wavered slightly. You're bleeding. It's just a scratch. His hand lifted, fingers hovering near her cheek but not quite touching, as if he was afraid of causing her more pain. The gentleness of the gesture stood in stark contrast to the cold fury in his eyes. Who did this? He asked, though they both knew he already had the answer. Jae-min, it's handled, Amara said quietly. You didn't need to come. Yes, he said, His eyes still fixed on her face. I did. He turned to Mrs. Han, and the temperature dropped another few degrees. Mrs. Han had recovered some of her composure. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin. Mr. Han, this is a private matter between myself and this nurse. It doesn't concern you. This nurse, Jae-min said, his voice soft and deadly, is my fiancé. So it concerns me very much. The gasps this time were audible, sharp intakes of breath that swept through the crowd like wind through grass. Amara felt her heart stutter. They'd agreed to keep their engagement private for now, to avoid complications. But Jae-min had just announced it to 300 of Seoul's most influential people. Knowing exactly what that would mean, Mrs. Han's face went white. Your fiancé? Yes, Jae-min said. And you just assaulted her. In public. In front of witnesses. Mrs. Han's shock twisted into something uglier. Recognition. Then bitter rage. So this is it, she said, her voice dripping with venom. This is how you finally get back at me, Jae-min? By flaunting your foreign whore in my face. The entire ballroom gasped. Several guests backed away, sensing the personal nature of what was unfolding. Jae-min's expression didn't change, but Amara felt the shift in him. The air around him seemed to grow colder, denser. Careful, stepmother, he said, the title sounding like an insult. You've already assaulted my fiancé. I'd hate for you to add defamation to the list of charges. Mrs. Han laughed, sharp and cruel. Charges? You think anyone will believe you over me? I've been part of the Han family for 20 years. Your father is dead, Jae-min cut her off. And the only reason you still carry the Han name is because I've allowed it. But that tolerance ends tonight. Amara watched the exchange, pieces clicking into place. The tension between them wasn't just about her. This was old, deep, personal. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Mrs. Han said, her voice shaking with fury. Waiting for an excuse to destroy me. Just like you destroyed your father's legacy. Turning his legitimate business into something profitable? Jae-min interrupted smoothly. Something powerful? Yes, I did. Because unlike him, I don't let people walk over me. I don't let bullies like you terrorize everyone around them without consequences. He stepped closer, his voice dropping so only those nearby could hear. I was 15 when you married my father. Do you remember what you said to me the first day you moved into our home? You said I was a disappointment. That I'd never amount to anything. That my mother had been weak, and I'd inherited her weakness. Mrs. Han's face paled slightly, but she held her ground. I remember every nurse, every housekeeper, every staff member you drove away with your cruelty. Jae-min continued. I remember how you made my father's last years miserable. How you isolated him from everyone who actually cared about him. And I remember thinking that one day you'd finally go too far. That you'd hurt someone I couldn't ignore. His eyes found Amara's. Tonight you did. I didn't, she was disrespectful. Mrs. Han said, now trying to fake concern. She was doing her job, Jae-min said. His voice never rose, never wavered. That was what made it terrifying. She was presenting a healthcare initiative that I personally funded with a 50 million won donation. An initiative designed to help vulnerable populations receive better care. And you attacked her for it. Mrs. Han's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. One of Jae-min's men stepped forward, handing him a tablet. Jae-min glanced at it briefly, then looked back at Mrs. Han. Would you like to know what I've learned in the 15 minutes since Amara contacted me? He asked conversationally. I've learned that this isn't the first time you've harassed medical staff. In the past 2 years alone, you've filed 17 formal complaints against hospital employees. 12 of those complaints were against foreign-born staff members. All 12 were investigated and dismissed as baseless. Though I wasn't surprised at all because this has always been your way. Mrs. Han's face flushed. Those complaints were legitimate. I've also learned, Jae-min continued as if she hadn't spoken, that 3 nurses have requested transfers away from VIP services specifically to avoid working with you. 2 of them cited verbal abuse. 1 cited a physical altercation that was quietly settled by hospital administration to avoid negative publicity. Dr. Kim, the hospital director, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Furthermore, Jae-min said, I've learned that the donation from my dad's foundation to this hospital came with strings attached. A donation I oversaw and asked you to finalize. Specifically, you demanded that no foreign staff be assigned to the VIP floor. The hospital quietly ignored that demand because it was discriminatory and illegal. But you've been making life difficult for any foreign-born medical professional who crosses your path ever since. How dare you investigate me, Mrs. Han hissed. You have no right. I have every right to protect my fiancé, Jae-min said, his voice cutting through her protest like a knife. And I have every resource necessary to ensure that your behavior has consequences. He turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying easily across the ballroom. I want everyone here to understand something, he said. This hospital serves all patients equally. The medical professionals who work here, regardless of where they were born, deserve respect and protection. What happened here tonight is unacceptable, and it will have consequences. He looked back at Mrs. Han. You will issue a public apology to Amara. You will also issue a public apology to every staff member you've harassed over the past 2 years. Additionally, you will resign from the hospital's board of directors and all associated committees, effective immediately. You can't make me do that, Mrs. Han said, but her voice had lost its conviction. Can't I? Jae-min asked mildly. Let's examine your options. Option 1, you do as I've asked. Option 2, I release all of this information to the media, along with security footage from tonight's incident that my team has already obtained from 3 different sources. I wonder how your social standing will survive that level of scrutiny. Mrs. Han's face had gone from white to gray. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice, Jae-min corrected. The consequences of your actions are already set in motion. I'm simply giving you the opportunity to handle this with some dignity. The ballroom was so quiet that Amara could hear her own heartbeat. She watched Mrs. Han's face cycle through emotions. Rage, fear, humiliation, and finally defeat. Fine, Mrs. Han said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Jae-min said. Fine, Mrs. Han snapped loud enough for everyone to hear. I'll do it. Good, Jae-min said. You can start now. Mrs. Han turned to Amara, and for a moment, pure hatred flashed in her eyes. But then she schooled her features into something resembling contrition. I apologize, she said stiffly, for my behavior tonight. It was inappropriate. Look at her when you apologize, Jae-min said quietly. And mean it. Mrs. Han's jaw clenched, but she met Amara's eyes. I apologize, Ms. Okeke, for striking you and for the things I said. It was wrong. Amara nodded slowly, accepting the apology even though she could see it cost Mrs. Han everything to give it, and that it didn't actually come from her mind. Thank you, Amara said simply. Mrs. Han turned and walked toward the exit, her assistant scrambling to follow. The crowd parted for her, but this time it wasn't out of respect. It was out of pity. As soon as she was gone, the ballroom erupted in whispered conversations. Phones appeared everywhere, people frantically texting and calling, spreading news of what had just happened. Jae-min turned back to Amara, his expression softening immediately. We're leaving, he said. It wasn't a question. The presentation is over. Let's go. He took her hand, careful of her injured wrist, and led her toward the exit. His men fell into formation around them, creating a protective barrier against the curious stares and whispered questions. In the car, Jae-min was silent. He sat beside Amara, one hand holding hers, the other clenched into a fist on his knee. The streetlights of Seoul flashed past the tinted windows. You didn't have to do that, Amara said quietly. Yes, I did. Announcing our engagement like that, in front of everyone. I should have done it months ago, Jae-min said, turning to look at her. I should have made it clear from the beginning that you're under my protection, that anyone who hurts you will answer to me. I don't need protection, Amara said. I can handle myself. I know you can, Jae-min said. I've watched you handle entitled surgeons, impossible cases, and bureaucratic nightmares without breaking a sweat. But you shouldn't have to handle everything alone. That's what I'm here for. Amara felt tears prick her eyes, the adrenaline from the evening finally wearing off. She was right about one thing, she said softly. I am a foreigner here. I don't fully belong. You belong with me, Jae-min said fiercely. And anyone who doesn't understand that will learn. Tonight was just the beginning. The car pulled up to Jae-min's building, a sleek high-rise in Gangnam. They rode the elevator in silence, but Jae-min never let go of her hand. Inside his apartment, he led her to the bathroom and carefully cleaned the cut on her cheek. His touch was impossibly gentle, his jaw tight with suppressed rage. I wanted to hurt her, he admitted quietly as he applied antiseptic. When I saw the blood on your face, I wanted to make her suffer. But you didn't, Amara said. No, because you wouldn't have wanted that. And because the kind of justice you deserve is the kind that lasts. Public humiliation, loss of status, social consequences that will follow her for years. He set down the cotton pad and cupped her face in his hands, careful not to touch the cut. Do you remember when we first met? He asked. When I insulted your taste in art? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You were the first person in years who spoke to me like I was just a person. Not Han Jae-min of the Han family. Not someone to fear or flatter. Just a man with questionable taste in watercolors. You did overpay, Amara said, and was rewarded with a quiet laugh. I did, he admitted. I wanted to win the bid and I didn't care what it cost. That's how I'd lived my whole life. Taking what I wanted, crushing anyone who stood in my way. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones, his touch reverent. Then you came along and told me I was wrong. And instead of being angry, I was intrigued. Who was this woman who had no idea who I was and didn't care? Who valued honesty over safety? I thought you were just some arrogant businessman, Amara said. I am an arrogant businessman. Among other things. Among very dangerous things, Amara said quietly. Jae-min didn't deny it. His world wasn't the legitimate business empire most people saw. It was darker, more complex. When Amara had finally learned the truth about what he really did, about the power he wielded in Seoul's underworld, she'd been terrified. Not of him, but of what loving him might mean. I never wanted this life to touch you, Jae-min said. I wanted to keep you separate, safe from all of it. That's not how this works, Amara said. If I'm with you, I'm part of your world. For better or worse. Tonight was worse. Tonight was necessary, Amara corrected. Mrs. Han needed to learn that her behavior has consequences. And everyone at that gala needed to see that foreign workers deserve the same respect as anyone else. Jae-min pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. She felt his heart beating against her cheek, steady and strong. I have something to tell you, he said after a moment. I've been working on a project. Something I haven't told you about yet. Amara pulled back to look at him. What kind of project? A community health clinic, he said. Specifically designed to serve foreign workers and marginalized communities. The populations you talked about in your presentation. Amara's breath caught. Jae-min. I bought a building in Yeongdeungpo, he continued. It's being renovated now. State-of-the-art medical equipment, multilingual staff, subsidized care for those who can't afford full treatment. I want you to run it. Me. You, he confirmed. Design the programs. Hire the staff. Make it everything you've dreamed of. I'll handle the funding and the politics. You handle the medicine. Amara felt tears spill over. Why? Because watching you talk about healthcare access, seeing how much you care about helping people, it changed something in me, Jae-min said. I've spent my life taking and controlling and destroying when necessary. I want to build something instead. Something that matters. Something that helps people instead of hurting them. He kissed her forehead, her cheek, careful of the cut. And I want to build it with you, he said. Amara kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into it. Love, gratitude, hope, and the bone-deep certainty that this man, dangerous as he was, would move heaven and earth to protect her. When they finally pulled apart, Jae-min rested his forehead against hers. No more hiding, he said. No more keeping you in the shadows. I want everyone to know that you're mine and I'm yours. Let them try to come for you. Let them try to diminish you. They'll learn very quickly what a mistake that is. You're terrifying when you're protective, Amara said, but she was smiling. Good, Jae-min said. Fear keeps people honest. The next morning, Amara's phone exploded with notifications. The The video of Mrs. Han slapping her had gone viral, shared thousands of times across social media. But so had the video of Jae-min's response, his calm dismantling of Mrs. Han's credibility, his public claim of Amara as his fiancée. The hashtags were trending. Hashtag Justice for Nurse Amara, hashtag Foreign Workers Deserve Respect, hashtag Han Jae-min the Protector. Mrs. Han had issued a formal public apology, posted on her social media and released to major news outlets. She'd announced her resignation from the hospital board and all affiliated committees. The backlash against her had been swift and merciless, with dozens of people coming forward with their own stories of her cruel behavior. Amara scrolled through the comments, amazed at the outpouring of support. Nurses, doctors, and foreign workers from across Korea were sharing their own experiences with discrimination, thanking her for standing up and speaking out. "You've started a movement," Jae-min said, reading over her shoulder. "I just wanted to do my job," Amara said. "And now you're going to do so much more." 2 weeks later, Amara stood in the lobby of the new community health clinic. The walls were painted a warm cream color, comfortable chairs lined the waiting room, and multilingual signs pointed the way to different departments. The staff Amara had hired milled about, preparing for the official opening next week. Jae-min came up behind her, sliding his arms around her waist. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it's perfect," Amara said, leaning back against him. "I think it's going to change lives." "Good," Jae-min said. "That's what it's meant to do." Amara turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I never thought I'd be here," she said. 6 months ago, I was just a nurse trying to survive in a country that didn't always want me. Now I'm engaged to you, running a clinic, and apparently a viral sensation." "You were never just a nurse," Jae-min said. "You were always extraordinary. The world just needed to catch up." He kissed her slow and sweet, in the middle of the empty clinic lobby. "I love you," Amara said when they pulled apart. "I love you too," Jae-min said. "And I promise you, anyone who tries to hurt you again will regret it for the rest of their lives." It should have sounded threatening. Instead, it sounded like a vow. That night, as they lay tangled together in bed, Amara thought about everything that had led to this moment. The slap that had started it all. The public confrontation. The justice that had been served not through violence but through exposure, consequences, and accountability. She thought about Mrs. Han, whose social standing had crumbled in the span of a single evening. About the other foreign workers who had reached out to thank her for standing up. About the clinic that would open its doors next week and start serving the communities that needed it most. And she thought about the man beside her, the dangerous protector who had chosen to use his power to build instead of destroy. "What are you thinking about?" Jae-min asked, his voice heavy with sleep. "Justice," Amara said. "And how it doesn't always look the way we expect." "No," Jae-min agreed. "Sometimes it looks like a clinic. Sometimes it looks like a movement. Sometimes it looks like love." Amara smiled in the darkness. "Sometimes it looks like all three." She fell asleep with Jae-min's arms around her, safe and protected and utterly certain that she had found exactly where she belonged. The world would try to test them again. There would be more challenges, more people who underestimated her or tried to use her connection to Jae-min against them both. But they would face it together, building something beautiful out of the darkness, turning pain into purpose and injustice into change. Because true power, Amara had learned, wasn't about control or fear or domination. True power was about protection, about creation, about using what you had to lift others up and make the world a little bit better than you found it. And together, she and Jae-min had all the power they needed. If you made it this far, drop a comment and tell us. Have you ever faced someone who thought they could disrespect you without consequences? Would you let someone fight for you, or handle it yourself? Subscribe now because next week we'll share how Amara and Han Jae-min first met at that charity auction. And trust me, the moment she accidentally insulted him changed everything. You don't want to miss it and more interesting stories. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.